A few days before the big anti-fracking march in Philadelphia, I'll be speaking to climate scientist Robert Howarth. He's a professor of ecology and environmental biology at Cornell University. In 2011, he was one of the people Time magazine was considering naming Person of the Year, especially for a paper that he wrote saying that natural gas produced by fracking could have a greater global warming footprint than coal. In June, he gave a briefing to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I saw you speak at 350 Connecticut and was startled to see you make an estimate that the world goes over 1.5 degrees centigrade in as little as 13 years. Could you explain why that number is so critical and how you arrived at that estimate?
Now, it's a critical temperature for sure, and the countries of the world came together in Paris last December at the COP21 negotiations to agree that it was in fact important to keep the planet below that temperature, certainly well below 2 degrees C. All of the climate models tell us that given current rates of greenhouse gas emissions, we're on a target to hit 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial baseline in a 12 to 13 year period. If anything, we're warming a little bit faster than the models suggested. The last year has been the warmest on record. And in fact, we're on target to hit 2 degrees Celsius, which is a very dangerous temperature in as little as 30 to 35 years from now. The reason those temperatures are dangerous, we're already warming the planet. We're already seeing damage from global warming. But the fear is that we will hit fundamental tipping points in the climate change system and end up in a situation of runaway global warming, at which point it'll really be too late to try to control our emissions. And there are a bunch of mechanisms in the climate system that could do that, either releasing carbon dioxide that's currently stored or slowing the rate of uptake by the ocean and natural ecosystems of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or releasing methane that's stored in geological formations.
We're losing you a little bit. I know you're talking on a cell phone. But you said there might be a problem. If we go too hot, we get a feedback issue with methane. What would that be?
For methane, the issue, they're twofold. There's a massive amount of methane stored in the world's oceans and the continental shelves in a form we call a methane class rate. It's sort of a frozen mixture of methane and water that forms under pressure and cool temperatures. It's actually above zero. It's not below the freezing point of water, but it's under pressure. If we warm the Earth's oceans, then we run a real risk of melting that. That's happened in the geological past, and it produces an incredible output of methane to the atmosphere. It'd be really, really devastating.
Now, you've been studying so-called natural gas, particularly natural gas produced by fracking. What's the problem with fracked natural gas?
Well, natural gas is mostly methane, whether it comes from conventional sources or from fracked gas. So, methane is more than 100 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas, and that means that tiny leakages of unburned methane to the atmosphere are a big problem for the climate. And it turns out that in conventional natural gas, if you look at the time it's developed at a well, through pipeline transmission and storage, all the way to the final consumer, somewhere in the neighborhood of a little bit under 4% of it is leaked to the atmosphere. That's bad. But for shale gas, it seems to be about 3 times more, up to 12% of fracked gas is leaked off to the atmosphere.
You say 3 times more?
3 to 4 times more. Yeah, it's about 3.8% emission from conventional natural gas and about 12% from shale gas. So about a little over 3 times worse for shale gas.
Wow. So we have around 13 years to solve our global warming problems, and it's a short-run emergency, and now we have methane, and that's a short-run problem. As you said, 105 times more potent as a greenhouse gas in the short run than carbon dioxide.
That's right. And the thing which most people is carbon dioxide and methane are both critically important gases. They're almost equally responsible for the warming we're seeing at the moment, but they act in fundamentally different ways. in one way, carbon dioxide is worse. When we put it into the atmosphere, it's going to be with us for hundreds of years because it's taken up and then released again by the oceans and by the forests of the world. So that's really bad. But on the other hand, if we were to reduce carbon dioxide emissions today, it really wouldn't change the rate of global warming for the next 30 to 40 years, again, because of those interactions with the oceans and forests, which provide a lag. So by reducing carbon dioxide, there is no way to slow the rate of global warming and keep us below 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. There's just no way. Methane's fundamentally different. If we start reducing methane emissions now, the planet climate system will respond very quickly and start to warm at a less rapid rate almost immediately. And so if we're serious about protecting the planet and keeping it below 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, reducing methane emissions is really the only way to do that.
So it's bad news, but also it's the good news.
It's the low-hanging fruit for solving the problem, and we didn't fully recognize that until just the last few years. But the scientific community does recognize that now, and we need to get that message out to the public and policymakers. The way to deal with our global climate target is to reduce methane emissions.
There was a piece in the New York Times a couple days ago about methane and how important it was to make sure it doesn't leak. And the writer said the reputation of methane was hanging in the balance. I wonder if you saw that piece.
I did, and I agree that we need to try and reduce methane leakage and emissions. The track history of the oil and gas industry is not good in that regard. In the United States, the oil and gas industry is clearly the major source of methane emissions. And that's gotten a lot worse with the shale gas revolution through fracking. Again, we see this much larger increase of methane emissions, and this is a new phenomenon. Half of all the shale gas that's ever been developed has been developed in the last 5 years in the United States, and there's a big flux of methane associated with that. In fact, we can see from satellite data that there's been a global increase in methane over the last decade, and it's coming largely from the United States. A large part of it is coming from fracked gas.
So if fracking is not this bridge to the future that they claim, what do we do to solve the global warming problem in the next 13 years?
Well, the bad news is that, yes, fracked gas is no bridge fuel at all. It's quite the contrary. It's taking us the wrong way. That's the bad news. The good news is that we don't need a fossil fuel bridge. The technologies for a completely fossil fuel energy economy are there or moving in that direction. Mark Jacobson from Stanford has pioneered this thinking, and he and I and others wrote a plan for the state of New York and also for California a few years ago, showing that we could be largely free of fossil fuels in both states by 2030 using technologies that are commercially available today, and that it's cost-effective to do it. So we don't need the bridge fuel. We can move directly into solar and wind and hydro and into energy-efficient technologies like electric vehicles and high-efficiency heat pumps for heating.
We faded out a little bit. I just wanted to get that name, Mark Jacobson. So you and he and others have been working on actual plans that would get the country fossil-free by, did you say 2030?
Largely free by 2030. Mark Jacobson has now produced a plan for all 50 states, an individual plan for each state. We published the first two of those with Mark, New York being the first one, and we said we could get most of the way there by 2030 and 2050 to be completely free of fossil fuels. And again, using technologies that are in commercial use today. We don't need to wait for big technological breakthroughs.
Okay, last couple questions. The rally is going to be, I believe, noon and around City Hall in Philadelphia this weekend on Sunday. Are you going to attend?
I am going to attend. I think this is a critical time in our society, and I'll be there for sure.